Hello, this is Sully Taylor with the League of Women Voters of Portland, and you are watching the Video Voters Guide or listening to our podcast. We are here today to talk with candidates running in the May 19th, 2026 primary election. We are grateful for the support of the Carol and Velma Saline Foundation, the Weiss Foundation, the Sarah Fruing Foundation, members of the League of Women Voters of Portland, and our media partner, Metro East Community Media. With me is Representative Rob Nosse, who is running for re-election to the State House of Representatives of Oregon. Welcome, Representative.
Sully, thanks for having me.
So we'll just dive right in. The first
Sounds great.
question I
Okay.
would ask is, do you support the elimination or modification of the Oregon kicker? Why or why not?
I do support the elimination and modification of the kicker. I have occasionally introduced bills in the 10 years that I've served to try to get rid of the kicker or have it used for different purposes. And sadly, in the year 2000, voters passed ballot measure 86. They put the kicker in the Constitution. That measure was referred to the voters by the Oregon legislature at the time when the legislature was controlled by Republicans, and they were fearful that Democrats at some point would get control again and would either reduce the kicker or eliminate it. It's been a challenge to get rid of it or change it ever since because the kicker also remains popular with voters. But hopefully, we'll come together and make some changes and run a ballot measure or campaign to do something to make it different.
Thank you. What changes, if any, would you support in the state to address the issue of climate change? Please explain.
Answering the question about changes I would make to address climate change in our state is hard because it's not my main area of expertise. I have read articles about, the criticism of our current regulatory approach that was set up under Governor Brown when the Republican legislators walked out of the 2019 session and the 2020 session to prevent the passage of a bill that would have stood up a cap and invest program in our state. Meanwhile, speeding up to now, the business community in our state has gotten interested in a cap and invest program similar to what we tried to set back up in 2019 and 2020. I think they believe that this would be a way to fund transportation. So it's a discussion I'm watching very closely. I believe we have to do something to reduce carbon emissions, particularly in the transportation sector. Hopefully, we can get a transportation package passed with some funding control auto emissions and make mass transit more available and affordable.
Thank you. Would you support or oppose the creation of a Citizens Independent Redistricting Commission to redraw Oregon state legislative and congressional election districts? Please explain your answer.
So, I would support an independent commission to redraw legislative districts. I do believe that politicians should not be able to pick their voters. Though, given the way that the far right and the MAGA right wing of this country in other states are weaponizing the redistricting system, I might be persuaded to stick with the approach that we currently have in Oregon.
Thank you. You are listening to the Video Voters Guide interview and podcast of Representative Rob Nosse, who is running for re-election to the Oregon State House of Representatives. The next question is, what, if any, changes in the state's policies concerning public schools would you support?
I haven't made up my mind yet about what policies or changes to public schools I want to support, but I'm studying the concerns and suggestions that I'm hearing about very carefully, as this is a topic that's coming up a lot right now, I think, in light of the budget cuts that Portland Public Schools is currently engaging in. I have to be honest, I haven't seen this issue with this kind of fervor on my radar since 2019. I was really delighted when I helped pass the Student Success Act back in 2019. I thought that act was going to fix things, but it's not played out the way that I had hoped, and the pandemic certainly didn't help things either. I'm trying to figure out what we could do about helping our school districts with their PERS obligations. I'm leery of making more changes to that pension system, but our districts are having trouble affording it. I think we have to do something to help out with our school districts with the high cost of serving kids with disabilities. The state has a cap to shield the state from the cost in terms of what we send to school districts, but then it means the school districts don't have enough resources to serve those kids. I'd like to do a better job and lift that cap, but that would cost close to $1 billion. The cost of teacher and staff health insurance is also becoming a thing. I recently learned that the funding distribution model that we use shortchanges high poverty schools. Fixing that formula, though, if we don't increase the amount of money we have going to it overall, probably creates winners and losers when it comes to funding allocations. So we probably have to fix that. And then, of course, I don't think we can ignore how we got here in the first place when we passed Measures 5 and 50 back in the 1990s. I also support mandating the science of reading. I think we need to legislate more time in the classroom. And candidly, I just think our problem is trying to find more money for schools in light of everything else that the state has to pay for and support.
Thank you. What role do you believe the state legislature should play in increasing the supply of low-income housing in Oregon?
That's a great question. I think we should take as much of a role as we can possibly afford. I think we should continue to use state bonding authority to make it easier to build housing that is more affordable. We should do more modular factory style assembly and bring those houses to the site. That approach to building has come a long way and makes it cheaper to build and faster, and we should embrace it as much as possible. I'm also candidly really intrigued by the social housing model that they use in Vienna, Austria, excuse me, and I wonder if we could find a way to make that possible to do something like that here in our state.
Thank you. Final question. What approaches and priorities would you use to shape the next state budget?
So that's actually also a really hard question for me to answer right now. The approaches and priorities I would use to shape the state budget are still forming for me. I was very happy in the short session to support Senate Bill 1507 because that bill did some good for the state in terms of disconnecting our tax structure from the federal tax structure, and we were able to save some state revenue that we would have thus not had access to be able to keep programs of and education programs going and not hardly make any cuts in our budget. If your viewers don't know, H.R. 1, the one big beautiful bill that was the Republican Congress and President Trump signed into law last summer, it's wreaking havoc on our state budget and important state programs like food stamps and Medicaid, which we call the Oregon Health Plan here. Thankfully, our state has two different savings accounts that if things are bad enough and we end up in a recession because of the war in Iraq, we'll have some resources to cover our costs. But I would say it's a little too early for me to say exactly what we're going to do just yet. Stay tuned.
Thank you, Representative Nosse. This concludes our video voters guide and podcast interview of the League of Women Voters of Portland of Representative Rob Nosse, who's running for re-election to the House of Representatives of Oregon. Election Day is Tuesday, May 19th. To find additional election resources, including online identifications of other candidates and ballot measures on which you may be able to vote, please visit the League of Women Voters of Portland's website, lwvpdx.org, and vote411.org, and then exercise your right to vote. Ballots will be mailed out starting on April 30th. For your vote to be eligible to be counted, your ballot must be received by the Multnomah County Elections Division or in one of the designated ballot drop boxes in Multnomah County no later than 8 p.m. on Election Day. We strongly recommend that if you are depositing your ballot with the United States Postal Service, you do so no later than Tuesday, May 12th, 1 week before Election Day. Your voice and your vote matter. Thank you for your interest.